Hello everybody, and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying a fly called the Ausable Wulff, and this is one of my favourite flies of all time, because this is where it all began for me with fly dressing. In the summer of 2008 on a family trip around the Adirondacks, I was about 14 at the time and I'd been fishing for a few years, and we stopped off at a little fly shop near Lake Placid, a shop run by a remarkable gentleman called Fran Betters. Fran was one of the giants of Adirondack fishing. He knew that west branch of the Ausable absolutely backwards, and this is a pattern that he'd developed. When we went into his shop, Mr. Betters was sat there, and bear in mind this was the year before his death in 2009. He was in the middle of a giant desk, laden high with feathers and furs and equipment, and he was tying some of his flies. And I watched absolutely mesmerised as he was manipulating his fur and his feathers, churning out fly after fly. And I thought that this was something that I would want to do. At the time, flies were something that I ordered in the post and came in a box and I then lost in trees. But watching Mr. Betters work, it woke something in me. And he tied for me a couple of flies, and I fished with them and I caught fish with them. They were very successful, in fact. And these are those flies, as tied by the hand of Mr. Betters himself. Flies that, when I got home, were very successful on my home waters, much to the disdain of the riverkeeper. And I tried to buy some and I couldn't find them anywhere, so I ordered them for myself on the internet, a little Vineyard starter fly tying kit. And I got down to it, and I was self-taught. I tied absolute rubbish for years, but I caught fish with them. Hopefully I'm a little bit better now. But this is my tribute to the Ausable Wulff and to Fran Betters and a serendipitous meeting in the summer of 2008 that really left a lasting impression on teenage Alex and started a hobby that I enjoy to this day. Fran specifies the use of woodchuck guard hairs for the tail, and they've got a very nice barred texture to them, and they float nice and high and dry. And he calls for rusty brown Australian possum. Unfortunately, the stuff I've got is much too dark, so I'll be substituting with a rusty orange hare's ear dubbing, which I've colour matched to the photos in his book and the unused flies I have from him. The wings are some white calf tail, and we're using that classic colour combination of grizzly and brown, and these are some really nice whiting Hebert minor saddles, lovely long feathers. So getting started, I've stacked in my hair stacker a small pinch of those woodchuck guard fibres, and I've stripped out all of the underfur. Don't throw it away, makes a great dubbing. And I'm going to tie those in on top of the hook shank and just lay down a bit of a foundation for the rest of the fly. Woodchuck was a pain to get hold of in the UK, but it is a lovely material, very nice stiff guard hairs, and it's got a lovely barred texture to it. Makes a very natural and very buggy looking fly, which was very much the ethos of Mr. Betters' fly dressing. He tied flies that worked. I've taken that up towards the thorax, and now I've stacked a pinch of my calf hair, ready to tie that in as the wing. And I'm going to tie this quite long and quite bushy, using a pinch and loop technique to secure down that wing on top of the hook shank. I think it's much easier to do it after you've laid down a base of thread, because it won't want to spin quite as much. If you do it on the bare hook shank, I find it has a habit of trying to roll around to the far side with the torque from the thread. I'll come in with my scissors and trim that off at an angle, leading down towards the tail, to help build in a bit of a taper. And one of the things that Mr. Betters said to me in the summer of 2008 was not to be shy with the number of thread wraps. He felt that if a fly didn't last for 50 trout, there was no point in tying it. So don't be shy with the number of turns you're putting underneath the wing, get it really nicely propped up, and it'll stay in position for many, many fish. I've caught plenty of trout on that one that I showed you earlier, both on the west branch of the Ausable and also at home on the Itchen, and it's held up well. Looking from above, I'm going to divide the wing into 2 even clumps, make some diagonal wraps across to divide them, back to front, then swapping front to back. Just doing a figure 8 mechanism to help hold them nice and separate. That's pushed it forward a little bit, so again a couple more turns underneath, get them propped back up. Standing proud, about 30 to 45 degree angle between them, and jutting slightly forwards over the front of the fly. To tidy up the wing posts, I'm making a wrap around each base followed by a locking turn. And once I'm happy with the wing position, returning my thread back down towards the tail. For the dubbing, It's prescribed to use rusty Australian possum. Unfortunately, the rusty Australian possum that I got was completely the wrong colour. But this hare's ear is actually a really close colour match. I've compared it to some of the unweathered flies that I've also got in my collection, and to the photos in his book, and it's absolutely spot on. I'm dubbing on a thin dubbing sausage, just making sure it's nice and even, ready to wrap forwards, and I'm aiming to build up a little bit of taper coming up towards the thorax, just building up a little bit of bulk for the fly. Don't make it too skinny, it'll look out of proportion with the rest of it. Now we can tie in our feather. There's two hackles here, classic colour combination, grizzly and brown. I'm using a cross-wrap technique, just letting the bobbin hang, hold that in position. I think it's much better to tie these in separately, you'll get a more secure tie down. Again, using a cross-wrap technique on the grizzly, then drawing the feathers back, bending the bare stems forwards, and making some tight wraps all the way up towards the eye of the hook, and those feathers aren't going anywhere. There's a bit of extra stem there, so which I'm going to trim away so it doesn't crowd the eye of the hook, and then we're ready to hackle. These are big bushy flies, lots of hackle, because there's lots of pocket water and fast flowing ripples and rapids, and having a nice densely hackled fly absorbs loads of floatant and it'll stay riding high and dry all day long, and it means you can fish for longer, you can get closer to the trout, and the fly looks natural and live, you can skate it over the water, and it brings the whole fly to life. It really sells the illusion to the trout. I had some fantastic takes. I brought the grizzly forward, made a couple of wraps over the top, one underneath to secure, and then I'm going to trim away. I've wrapped it in open turns, leaving a little bit of space in between for my next hackle, and I like to do this separately rather than wrapping them both together. I think the final result is a little bit neater, and it's just easier to work around the wings. With the first hackle, you can draw the wings forwards and backwards and get really nice and close. It's a bit trickier with the second, and you can see I nearly accidentally split the wing here, but you can just go back, try and draw it back from the top, make sure it's nice and tight and close, and that'll prop the wing up really nicely. Again, an extra turn of brown in the front, and you can see that's created a really buggy, bushy looking fly. We can now tie off that brown feather, again a couple of wraps over the top, draw it backwards, and just take a moment to build up a little bit of a head. Finally, here's a little look at the finished fly. I think I've captured a bit of the essence of the original, even if my techniques might be slightly different, but that's part of fly dressing. Mr. Betters inspired me to get started, and I've learned so much in the last 13 years. Do give this one a go, it's a great pattern. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.